really wrote a version of it years ago, decades ago, just for my family. And it was then called the Nine Best Secrets of Christmas.
Yep.
And then years later, I'm like, well, why don't I change that to 12? Because, you know, the 12, what is it? 12
days of Christmas.
Yeah, the 12 days of Christmas. So I thought I'd tie it into that kind of. It takes 12 memories from my childhood growing up in Rochester, New York at Christmas in the 60s and 70s and universalizes those memories with a message, which I call secret, in each chapter.
That's awesome. Well, Dan, I know you've got some questions for the great Herbie J.
I love the
Pilato.
title. I read some part of the book that I was able to get a hold of. Wonderful idea.
Thank you.
Did you ever see the famous television movie called A Christmas Story?
You mean the feature film?
Yeah. Well, with Ralphie.
Yes.
Yes.
I did.
I watched it 2 or 3 times every year, because I think it's a fabulous story. It reminds me of when I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s. But we have a different world today.
Yeah.
And we have, as you said, this quest from more and more people for nostalgia. I just recently finished a book that's about to be published, and I was doing some research on Google to find out what I should write about. I was trying to see what is America reading? What does America want? And the number one genre in fiction is romance. And the number one time for romance is during and after the Second World War, the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking at the synopsis of your book. You know, it's something that's desperately needed. I mean, what I read, I was impressed with, because I believe it's important, because I wonder. I have 4 sons and I have 4 grandchildren, and from 7 to 15, and 2 girls and 2 boys. And you know, I wonder what's going on in their mind. I mean, I have one granddaughter who takes horseback lessons. Now she's taking fencing lessons. This is at like 9, and she doesn't have a lot of time to be herself. Mm-hmm. She's always doing something. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious, as a writer myself, how did you decide? You talked a little bit about life experience. How did you decide what were the items that were going to be in the 12 days?
Well, I just drew from my memory. It was a natural outpouring. This book is a natural. There was no research. I didn't have to interview anybody. You know, it was just going back to the heart of my family. I was very blessed with an extensive Italian-American family. Both my mother and father had 10 brothers and sisters. So it was a party every night. So there was a lot to draw from. And we didn't have any money. You know, we had a lot of love, but there was no money. You know, so we didn't have the opportunities that are so vast for so many today. I mean, a Charlie Brown Christmas was a big deal. Watching that, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, you know, both of those shows I talk about in the book, you know, that was a big deal because we had a simple life. And, you know, it's not as though I certainly don't appreciate success, because my gosh, I've had my measure of it. And it's not as though I don't love money and, you know, hate all, you know, abundant things. That's crazy. I believe that we're supposed to be abundant, and there's a key to that abundance, however, is generosity. and sharing what you have. And that's what my parents taught me. You know, in the midst somehow of having nothing, I still was a spoiled child. My father still somehow managed to buy me a stereo and buy me a color TV set. When he bought me that color TV set, I couldn't believe it. It was like a shining thing in the middle of the living room. But they balanced it out with teaching me how to appreciate those things. Mm. And I think that's what's missing today. There's so much available. And we have access to so much abundance that we don't fully appreciate it, what's out there and what we have. And to this day, if I get a new frying pan, I celebrate me buying a new frying pan. If I get a new car, of course, yeah, great. But I celebrate all the things that I have, and I appreciate all the things I have because I went without for so long, and I learned to appreciate them because I had that balance of priorities from my parents. My mother, she worked for Kodak for 17 years, and Kodak was a big deal in Rochester. It still is. It's a big deal around the world. But if you lived in Rochester, more times than not, you probably worked at Kodak. Well, she had me in her 18th year of Kodak and retired, but she lost out on the benefits. But she didn't care. She would have got benefits if she would have stayed that 18th year fully. But she wanted to stay home and take care of me. So this isn't, a push for mother should stay home or father should. I don't care who stays home. I think somebody should stay home at some point and help at least raise the kid. I mean, I was just blessed in so many ways beyond money that I learned to appreciate money more because I didn't have it.
That's awesome.
So do you have siblings?
I have one sister.
Has she read the book? Has she read the book?
She has read the book. She's in the book. She loves the book. Everybody who's read the book, inside and outside the family, including many celebrities, have loved it. And they said, Herbie, this is amazing because it reminds you of my childhood. Those of every faith. You don't have to be Christian and Catholic and to love Christmas to love this book. That's just my experience of the holidays that I have universalized for the mainstream reader. And I dedicate the book to love, to the different cultures, because we cannot be divided today. It can't work. The world, whether we blow it up ourselves or some aliens come down or God takes care of it, whatever, we can't keep on going like we're going. And love is the unifying force, and we have to focus on what makes us the same and not what makes us different. I don't talk about politics at all on my Facebook page or my social media pages. I don't talk about in any public forum because to me it becomes divisive, and I try to take the high road. And that doesn't mean that I don't have my opinions, because I got them. And that doesn't mean that, I'm perfect, that I'm holier than thou, because that ain't the case at all. At all. But I try to take the high road and be the peace that I seek. And because so many people look up to me on Facebook, or kids are watching me on Facebook, or they're following me, I don't want to swear. I don't want to use vulgarity. I don't want to take the Lord's name in vain. I don't want to talk about what's wrong with the world. I try to be positive. And if I sometimes fall and make a note of negativity, I'll delete it. I'll go, oh, no, that's not right. And then I'll delete it.
All right, I've published 7 novels. There's not an expletive in any book. If you have to use an expletive to explain your position, then you got language skill problems.
That's right.
And a writer got serious problems if all he can is think is 4-letter words.
Absolutely.
So, where do you think the turning point was? Where did things change?
For
your what happened with your family and all the family quote values that you had when you grew up to where they are today? Where was that transition point?
Probably I was always a good kid, but I was a little bratty, even still, and I could sing and I could dance and I could do things that, the average kid in my neighborhood couldn't do. So that was tough, and I'd get bullied. But later on, it all changed as an adult when my parents became older, and I ended up being their primary caregiver. 13 years of my life I dedicated to caring for them when everybody was like, Herbie J, what are you doing? Move on with your life. Well, your parents have lived their life. I'm like, I want to do this. And I don't see God abandoning me because I want to care for my parents. I don't see God not giving me what I want later in life because I'm taking this time out now in my prime to care for them. I never worried about that. And ultimately, I didn't want to be a child star, quote, and then, have it all fall apart when I'm 20. And because my show would end or my success would end. I wanted my success to come later, and I prayed for that, and it has. So caring for my parents was a changing point. I went, you know what? This is different. I want to fix some of the wrongs that I did as a kid, and I want to do that now with my parents. And I ended up becoming their parent. My mother, my gosh, she was like my wife and my daughter in her last years, and I wouldn't have changed a thing in the way I did it. I became a better person in caring for them, I think.
But it's how old was she when she passed?
She was 86, and my father was 83, and he died in 95. She died in 2008.
Yeah. So when we think about the parents and the role of the children to take care of parents, I'm helping a very, very good and close friend whose wife's relationship with her mother, when her mother was living away from them, was one thing, and when she got ill, she, quote, couldn't put her in a nursing home, so she brought her to her house at damn near the expense of her marriage. And now mom has decided that it's probably better for her to go to a facility that can give her the health care that she needs, rather than depending upon her daughter, who's not a nurse, to try and take care of her. But it was a hard decision. I had the same problem with that's the wrong word, same challenge with my brother-in-law and his mother. He wanted her in their house, and she was not capable of being taken care of in the house. Yeah. And when they finally helped her make the decision as to what to do and where to go, he felt guilty about it, but he also was risking his own marriage. And so I think that when you did it and you were taking care of both of your parents and you devoted 13 years at that, that's an amazing fact, an amazing story. But I look at myself and I'd be curious how you would answer this question. I have four sons, 3 daughters-in-law. And I'm not sure that I'd want any of them to give up their life and what they're trying to do to come to Florida and take care of me and my wife. And that's when we live on Sanibel and used to till the hurricane came. But we had decided before that we needed to find a facility that could take care of us at the various stages of the final end of our life, and we would get professional care, and still be accessible to have an active life as much as we physically could or mentally could. But when I was growing up, when you were growing up, we didn't do that. We brought mom and dad into our home or transferred them home to home. And I'm not sure that was necessarily the best thing for them or us. And I'm curious what you think about that big change today.
Well, the way I look at it is it's different for everybody. Just like when someone dies and, some people, it takes a year for them to get over the grief or 10 years or whatever. I really resent it when people say, it'll just come with time, and you should treat yourself better or whatever. Everybody grieves at their own pace. So right. Every major decision like that. With my mother, in the end, I brought her to another facility because I couldn't handle her. She needed 24-hour care. But as I look back, I wish I would have kept her in an apartment because we had aides there helping her. So that really kind of would have worked. The place I moved her into was a wonderful facility, but she had dementia, and it was throwing her off a little bit. She was more isolated. Instead of me going across the lawn from my apartment to her apartment, I was now going 10 miles from my apartment to her facility. So I didn't stop seeing her. I kept on seeing her just as much. So it was really an added stress. But that's the way it turned out. And so as I look back, I wish I would have kept her at home. Now, that's me. And I was, single. I didn't have any other responsibilities. It was that's just the way things were for me. If I was married, it might have been different. I'm sure it would have been different.
Yeah. Have you had that discussion with your daughter as to whether she should take you in?
I don't have a daughter.
Oh, I thought you had a daughter.
No, I don't think so.
Now, Herbie, we've talked a little bit about your Christmas book, but talk to me and Dan about some of your other books, because you do a lot with, as the kids say, old school television.
Yeah. By the way, if I did have a daughter and if she was single, it would be good if she would care for me. But if she was married, I'd say we'll work something out. Either way, faith is the answer. That's how I look at it. Yeah,
I agree.
So my first book was on Bewitched, the TV show, which led to a reboot of that book called Bewitched Forever. Then I did 2 biographies on Elizabeth Montgomery, the star of that show. And then I did companion books to Kung Fu, starring David Carradine. I did a combined book about the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman. Then I did a book about Life Goes On, which starred the great Chris Burke, who has Down syndrome in real life. And it was that show on ABC Sunday nights, which broke all boundaries of those families who happen to have a child who would be disabled or a challenge of some sort. And then I finished my Sean Connery book, which is coming out next year, working on Diana Rigg. And then I have my classic TV history book called Retroactive Television that's coming out at the beginning of next year, and that's about the positive effect of classic TV. So in the midst of all that, I had my show, then again with Herbie J. Pilato, which I'm very proud of. We just did 1 season, but it was something I wanted my whole life, and something, by the way, I believe heaven gifted me with. At 58 years old, I still got a TV show. So taking care of my parents didn't stop that. It just came later.
That's awesome.
I am 77 years old, and I produce television shows and radio shows, and I write books and commentary. But one of the fun things that I love to do is trivia on the internet, especially television, 50, 60, 70, 80 year. I love that because that was a wonderful time. And I remember when we got our first black and white 3-channel television set on a crazy, wasn't a round screen, it was like a round with the top and the bottom chopped off. And Howdy Doody. I have a Howdy Doody replica on my Christmas tree. I mean, it's just, but that was, the reason why I mentioned that is that I know this is probably going to sound strange, but I enjoyed that as entertainment. There's an awful lot of stuff on television today or in the movies that I would not consider entertainment.
No, I agree 100% with that. There is, and I've talked with James about this before. There's a cynicism, there's an edginess, there's a darkness. All the characters look the same. All the characters act the same. There's no happy endings on TV. I can't hear anything that anybody says because they're all mumbling. Yeah. I can't see anything that anybody's doing because everything is so murky. So it's just sad because there's talent out there, but it's not being utilized properly. It's like, no, God forbid you have a happy ending or an uplifting show. But it's missing from TV, sadly. That's why I gravitate to the older shows. People today, there's some kids today, which is very sad, who've never seen Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or Charlie Brown Christmas. Yep. And some who have seen it and they're like, it's just too slow. I can't watch this. I'm like, oh my God. I want to tape him to the chair and make him watch a Charlie Brown Christmas.
See, I think that part of the problem is that we have a generation of writers who are not storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to tell a story. And so they have all this dialogue that really doesn't make any sense. And it's we're watching this show on one of the cable channels, and it's called From Scratch. And it's a story about a young black woman from Texas who goes to Italy because she wants to understand her potential to be an artist. And then she's going to go on to law school, and she meets a guy in Florence, and they fall in love, and they come back to the United States. But the dialogue is wonderful. The acting is genuine. You can understand what they're saying. You can see the sensitivity. I as a writer, I just love great stories, and
that's happening in music too. There's all the songs today. They're mumbles. That's what I hear on popular music. I don't hear any melodies. I don't hear any lyrics. I like country music. I think country music is the only music that has stories left with songs.
Right.
All this other stuff, I can't understand anything anybody's saying. And there's no, again, melodies. There's no rhythms. It's sad. So
it's amazing. I think that you may disagree or agree. That's fine. Either way, I agree with you about country music, 100%. But I believe that women singers in country music are better storytellers than men with their music.
Now, why do you classify it like that? Because I don't see the difference.
Because I think the woman's perspective in the music they write and the way they perform.
Yeah, okay. Because every country music, usually by guys, is about drinking.
Right.
It's about drinking or manipulating women.
Yes.
You're right.
And with women, it's usually I'm in a bad relationship with a man or whatever. I mean, it's somewhat relatively. It's like writing novels. Stephen King has a wonderful book about writing, and he talks about there were only 32 plots. That's it. There's only 30. Every story ever written is one of those 32 plots. And if you can figure out the 32 plots, you get some idea what to write. But
that's like there's only 7 characters according to Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Sleepy characters, happy characters.
Yeah.
Characters.
And creatively, they gave him those names, Sleepy and Happy and Doc. So how's the book going? How's it selling?
It's you know what? I'm so proud of it because no publisher wanted to do this book. And I got hundreds of rejections over the years. And I've never self-published, but this book is self-published with Archway Publishing, which is the self-publishing arm of Simon & Schuster. And it's now turning out to be one of the most successful books I've ever had. So, ha, 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 to all the publishers who turned it down.
So do you believe it was because it was self-published or it's just the story?
No, it's because of the story. It's because it resonates with people, you know. It's something that everybody loves a party. Everybody loves the holidays. And now, again, more than ever, we need to celebrate something together, you know, and holidays unify us. And, you know, it had been delayed a couple years, really. I was supposed to do it 2 years ago, and then it was supposed to be last year, and I was supposed to go back to Rochester, where I'm from, which is the book is based in New York, and I didn't go last year or the year before. But this year I'm going back to Rochester. This year the book is coming out. This year I'm having a book signing at the Pittsburgh Barnes & Noble in Rochester. Family, friends, colleagues that I've known, you know, my whole life, we're all going to get together at that book signing. So it's meant to be this year. It's just some things are meant to be, and this book was meant to be published this year. And I love that Dean Butler, who starred on Little House on the Prairie, he's written the foreword, and Jerry Hauser, who was on the Brady Bunch, and he did voiceover work for the Rudolph special on CBS in the 80s. The special debuted in '64, but he did the voiceover work for the show during commercials. in the 80s, and his name is Jerry Hauser. The subtitle of the book is A Treasure House of December Memories Revealed. Dean Butler, Little House on the Prairie. Now, I didn't plan it like that, but that's how it worked out. So I think it's kind of
that's awesome.
It's kind of gorgeous. And the cover is designed by Carol Munchie of Rochester, a genius artist in Rochester, New York. I'm very proud of the book. That's all I can say. And it means more to me than any other book I've done.
Has Simon & Schuster come to you and offered to publish the book for you?
That's what I'm hoping, and that's why I went with them. Why I went with Archway is because I was told if it does well, Simon & Schuster will pick up the book. So that's what I'm hoping. Good.
Good luck to you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Before we let everybody go, Dan, bring us up to speed on your nonprofit and everything that's going on with you, and then we'll go to Herbie and wrap things up.
Let me ask. Can I just ask Herbie one real quick question?
Yeah,
Are you going to do an audiobook?
Excuse me?
Are you going to do an audiobook?
Yes. That is part of the plan.
Okay.
One audio publisher rejected it because it wasn't long enough. So I don't know what that meant, but
so I'm going to embarrass you by asking for a favor.
Okay.
Jim mentioned my foundation. I have a foundation called Songs and Stories for Soldiers. It's designed to help veterans deal with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, sleep deprivation, and suicide. We're in 133 facilities across the country. We've given away 23,000 MP3 players.
Wow.
When you get an audiobook, I would like you to donate one copy of the audiobook so we can make it available to veterans.
Absolutely.
Super.
Absolutely.
That's enough for me, Jim. That's my Christmas.
Major Christmas. Well, Herbie, when is your next book out?
The next book is out in January or February, I believe. Retroactive Television, an in-depth perspective of classic TV's social circuitry. And Eric Scott, who played Ben Walton on The Waltons, has written the foreword. And I've interviewed a lot of celebs for that book as well.
Is that self-published?
No, this is with Headline Books.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, Herbie, you have been fantastic as always. Dan, this has been fantastic. And our previous guest, the doctor, we thank him as well. And Herbie, have yourself a great Christmas. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Happy Kwanzaa. All the stuff.
Can I mention where people can get the book?
Let's go. Yes.
Go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, or you can go right to HerbieJPilato.com, and you can get a signed copy directly from me. I would recommend just going to Amazon.
Good.